First of all, are there any fascinating questions you have on your mind? Any intriguing quandaries, perplexing conundrums? Yes, sir. Ken, I always knew Ken could come through.
No, actually, we were talking about this the other day, and it is so totally irrelevant. I thought it was the kind of question you might get a kick out of. There's, in yoga, how does yoga theory deal with, let's say the Darwinian theory of evolution? That is, there weren't humans around, now there are, and where did the spirit come from, etc.
Okay. There was a famous yogi who really went into that question. His name was Aurobindo. You can pull up articles by him and about him on the website. He departed his body around 1952, if I recall correctly. He was so fascinated with that question that he went in it from this way. He sensed that our genetic inheritance was pretty fixed. Not in the sense that you get blonde hair if your parents were blonde or blue eyes and so on. No, he didn't go in for it from that angle. He went in to see if he could change the DNA on death. Because he felt that we all had a time clock. That the genetic ability to repair cells finally ran out. That cells could only replicate themselves so many times. And that nature, as she sensed that she didn't have much left, would slow down, and thus you'd start aging. So he began to explore the possibility, can I go and find out the code and alter the code? That was his big question. He wrote about it. Now, yogis tend to look at evolution slightly different than what is the conventional understanding. We somehow have this idea that cognitive agents somehow came out of matter. On the face of that, that's pretty hard to prove because it's a contradiction. Because you're saying more comes from less. This chair, I don't think, can think. Nor can the clothes you wear, the chair you're sitting on, the walls of this room. Matter has an adaptability and a malleability, but among all its potentialities, I don't think cognition is one of them. I've never heard, of a bench talking back to me, saying, "You're too heavy, get off me." So it's very hard for me to understand how more can come from less, how the subtle can come out of the gross. However, yogis take it the other way. They think evolution started just in the reverse. You start from a cognitive agent, a human spirit, no matter involved, consciousness. And now consciousness decides what would it be like to be embodied in matter. And let's start from scratch. Now, a friend of mine was the former head of the astronomy, excuse me. Shouldn't say that word. Astronomy department at the University of Texas. He was a Minnesotan, believe it or not. And Jim had a passion. He wanted to capture the skies as they truly are in the colors of a star that's being born. Because all energy has colors. It's on a wavelength. The current film, and still today, that you would buy in the store, whether it be Fuji, Kodak, whatever, has slight distortions in it. Not so perceptible to the ordinary optic nerve, but with a fine-tuned spectrograph, he can see that it's incompatible with what we're getting through the telescope. So Jim spent 7 years in his garage developing a film that was a perfect imitation of the stars. He did it. Cambridge University of England bought everything he did. And they brought out a magnificent, large manual of the skies. And his original photographs can be seen in the Chicago Planetarium. If you ever get to Chicago, I'd urge you to go out and see them. They're all on the walls by Jim Ray, W-R-A-Y. Jim and I had a discussion one day about the origins of life. And he theorized that since he found all the amino acids for human life in the stars, guess what? We were stars at one time. And over the eons, there was an intentionality that worked with matter so that slowly, I mean slowly, you began to expose yourself to all the basic matters of this world. And he said the hint he got was in our bodies are the various ingredients that make up the world. We have this affinity for nature, for the various, the vitamins, the minerals especially, the fluids. Everything in gross nature is in us in some way. And so you may have been a pine cone one day, Ken. Barbara might have been a magnolia tree, see? You went through all of that and you carry with you the affinity for nature. This is how he saw it. But you start out as in the yogic perspective, first as a spirit deciding, I want to enjoy myself as an embodied being. Let's find out how to do it. Or let's find out what it's like. That's how they look at it. So it's not more from less, it's more allowing itself to be in less in different ways. Go through the whole gradations of matter and energy and nature. So, we're out that one. Any other questions? Is that neat, Barbara, to look at it that way?
Yes, that's very cool.
Yes. Okay. Well, I got a couple things I'd like to talk about. Let's talk about the human mind. We won't spend a lot of time on it. It's not too difficult a subject. All right. I want to come at it from how do we compose a delusion? Ooh. Do we have delusions? What is a delusion? Anybody want to give me a rough description or definition of a delusion? You know, there's that chant, lead me from the unreal to the real. The word unreal can also be translated as delusion. So there's an opposition right there. Lead me from the delusion to the reality. But what is a delusion? What components are involved in its composition? Is it like a mirage? Has anybody here ever seen a mirage? Yes? No? Okay. They're rather fascinating, isn't it? Here's your eye seeing, and you get closer and closer, and there's nothing there. But you look farther away, and it's still there, as if it runs from you, huh? You've seen shimmering of heat coming off a radiator, how when you look through it, okay. And you have often, probably not as often as I have, been convinced of something and realized, how could I have missed that? The human mind has a propensity to be in touch with the real. Everything, okay? We know things through our thoughts. We don't know our thoughts. Oh, we can stop and reflect on it, that we have that incredible ability. But the act of knowing is the ability to somehow be in touch with the other. You're walking through the woods. You're awed by the beauty, the shapes, the contours, the odors, the sounds. You hear you're taking all this in. You're not paying attention to your thoughts, your image. You're really in contact with what is providing those images. The images are simply a medium to get there. Okay. Now, you decide one day you're going to be very successful. You have just entered a law firm, and you've decided one day you are going to be on the Supreme Court. That's your ambition. Now, what have you done? You have composed an idea which is pointed to the future. And that idea is so strong, so compelling, that it begins to, as it were, orchestrate your energies on a daily basis, so that even though you're living an ordinary life for all purposes, getting up in the morning, eating breakfast, shoveling the snow, going to your job, the overriding unity or unifying notion in your life is you're going to be on the Supreme Court one day. And so as you go along, anything that looks like a possibility of getting me closer to the fulfillment of that idea, you will grab onto. I think we all do that in various ways. You want to raise your children. You have an idea of what that means, and you try to fulfill it on a daily basis. You have certain goals at work, or you have certain ideas about where you want to spend a vacation. We can't help but be goal-minded. The Greeks called it telos, T-E-L-O-S. Telos means purpose in Greek. We're purposeful animals. Okay. Now, you're gathering information along the way, and you're filtering it, and siphoning it, and deciding, this really works, this doesn't. This will help me, this won't. You make mistakes, we all do, because you're new at this game. So there's a certain amount of, maybe, maybe not. I'll try this, but this works well, okay. Now, along the way though, you're holding on to certain ideas. You have certain expectancies about this goal. You may even, as it were, dream about it, fantasize about it. We do it all the time, of course. What would it be like? Where would you like to live next year? What would your ideal house be like? And you talk this over with your friends at the coffee store. Okay. Now those are delusions, but they're harmless, for the most part. We can create in our minds what looks like reality, but is not yet. This is a natural facility that we possess. The trouble comes in is that when we sometimes feel a tug between being startled by what is really there and it doesn't match our expectation. I thought that person was like this, but that's not compatible with my idea of who I think that person is. Is that a delusion? Yes. But it's not one you have contrived. It's not one you have deliberately fostered in a way that I'm not going to look at reality, I'm just going to believe in my delusion. Accept that as reality. Yoga is not worried about the accidental delusions. It's more worried about those we choose to believe in spite of what reality is saying. Hey, that doesn't work in life. Sorry. That's the one that meditation will bring up all the time. So meditation is very selective, very discriminating. Oh, you think you're going to get away with this, huh? Boom, it comes up. Because there, as I said, remember the natural propensity of the mind is to recognize what is real. You're built in that. You can't do it otherwise because you're a cognitive spirit. However, you can put screens in there. You can put distortions if you want. But in order to do that, you have to choose to do it. You can't blame it on your parents, or your neighbor, or CNN, anything like that. You have to recognize that you choose sometimes the way you want to believe, the way you want to examine the facts. What upset me once when I was doing my thesis in Holland, I was on this very notion of evolution because I posed Swamiji's experiments, this is the guy I'm talking about, Mike, as an orderly, purposeful, cognitive agenda that could never come about with that kind of integrity just by chance. At the time I was writing my thesis, the cat's meow in Europe was a Frenchman, the French. And his name is Jacques Monod. He was a biologist. And he wrote the so-called masterpiece. Chance and Necessity was called, as it was translated into English. I decided, I've got to go get this guy. Because he was just given the Nobel Prize. And I thought, my God, if he can win one, I can win one. Excuse me. It was a little vain in those days.
Delusional.
Delusional.
He listened, see? Good one. Go to the class, head. All right. He gets interviewed on BBC. And they put the entire interview in the paper. And I get the paper, and I'm reading it. And I go, oh my God, I don't believe this. So I grab it and I put it all into my thesis, and I just start dismantling it. The gist of it was this. Well, Professor Monod, how did you really arrive at the essence that life is all chance? That things just sort of come together in a random way. They're an aggregate of elements that just tumble together for a while and then fall apart. There's no order at all, right? Yes. Well, tell us, sir. We're waiting. How did you come? What was your methodology that allowed you to arrive at that startling conclusion? And this is his answer. Very simple, sir. We choose our methodologies. I chose to ignore all evidence for purpose, order, and then he tells us. Hey, I'm home free. I just ignore all the evidence for order and purpose and say, see, life is all this. And make this big generality. Oh my God. Okay, but we do that all the time in our own ways. And sometimes we get the pull from emotions. We think emotionally this feels better. Intellectually I should, no, we won't name things like food and other sort of interesting pleasures. Huh? So emotion can get in there sometimes and say, hey, mind, let me provide some evidence from my side. Ooh. Now Plato, interestingly, saw this scenario going on, and he used the metaphor of a charioteer trying to hold on to 4 very strong horses. Each horse was representing a different powerhouse of emotion. And the whole point is, charioteer was the mind, and this was your passions or your emotions. And this, you had to learn to orchestrate it so you could stay on the road and not get run away by the horses. He wrote a whole dialogue on that, by the way. So, why is delusion preferred then sometimes to life? I think one of 2 reasons, ultimately, and it's more emotional, I think too. I'd say fear or pleasure. I don't want to change my lifestyle. I'm enjoying what I'm doing, even though I know I should really, this is more in agreement with life. Or I'm afraid that if I change, I'm not sure what will happen. At least I know what's happening with my delusions. There's a certain familiarity, because there's some reality mixed in there. See, it's not a pure delusion. That's a mirage. So we tend to have mixed. And so to purify that, to clarify that, that's going to demand changes, because the mind instantly recognizes what's going to have to be done. You have that ability. And again, this is where meditation comes in and says, well, Marianne, how long are we going to stay here? You've plateaued now for 4 years. You got to make a choice. Oh, you want to make the same old one again? I'm just going to come back and remind you, you still want to make that one? And that's how it happens in meditation. Why do these things keep coming up? Because you hadn't faced them yet. Oh. See, some things we can't just witness, because all we're going to witness is the fact we're stuck. There are always two parts to meditation: the inner and the outer. The inner is your practice, where you go within, you make the journey, consciously, fully awake. And you begin to witness, so that you can get to the deeper states of the treasures, the unconscious. However, when the delusion comes up repeatedly and says, face this, that means you're supposed to do something in your lifestyle. You don't change your meditation. You got to change your behavior. You got to change the way you're looking at something or responding to something. Because you're not going to go anywhere until you do. There was a great Christian mystic in the 15th century called John of the Cross. He was a Spanish Carmelite monk. He wrote some beautiful works, kind of heavy. And he said, if there's the slightest hesitation that makes you draw back from reality, even if it's like a thread, it'll hold the bird from soaring into the heavens. So he compared it, as you get deeper and deeper, tiny threads that are holding your ankle back from soaring. You've got to sever that thread. But the beautiful part is, it's not hard ultimately. Because as you grow in your awareness of what constitutes spirit, you know you're invulnerable. There's nothing that can hurt you ultimately, unless you permit it. So this is the beauty, that there's a growing in your own personal philosophy through the practice of meditation, because it gives you the clarity to pierce through the delusions and see them for what they are. I don't need that anymore. Why do I do that? And the elephant will drop away then. We hold on to things because we want to. Old grudges. You know, some people, the most dreadful day of the year is Christmas dinner at Grandma's, because I got to deal with all my relatives. And some of them I haven't talked to, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's nice. I'll make sure you sit over here next time. That you're carrying that. And you dread that day, because now it's coming out on the table in more ways than one. That's the kind of thing you got to examine occasionally and say, whoa, what's going on here? Because there's an awful lot of things you've got there that are so easy to drop off. Why? Because you've grown and you didn't know that. It's like finally when you walk up into your room and say, why do I have this in my closet? Finally you give it away. But 2 years ago, you couldn't do that. I know I'm going to wear it. Yes, I haven't worn it in 4 years. I know I'm going to wear it though. And finally, you let it go, because you have grown. You say, this is out of style. I'll never do this again. You let it go. Same way. The mind recognizes that certain ideas that you hold so dear are really out of style. They don't fit you anymore. Just like the clothes don't fit you anymore. We won't go into that. And this is, again, releasing the delusions, because you've been holding on to that and thinking, oh, I need this. I can't live without it. Well, what will my friends say? I have nothing to wear, and all this goes on. Huh? It's almost like an addiction. The danger is when we mistake this item as somehow essential to us. We need things. We should have pleasures. There's nothing wrong with abundance, provided you have the freedom inside to see it for what it is. So that you don't get hemmed in. They don't become threads that keep you from soaring. Rather, they become springboards to bounce you out into the sky. Huh? Swami Rama used to say, this world is to be used and enjoyed, but not to be hoarded, not to be possessed in the greedy way. That's the danger, because now you've hemmed yourself in. You've created your delusion. You've taken something that is purely relative and you've made it an absolute for you. And you can't understand other people why they don't appreciate it that way. And we see that happening all the time. And in no way do I want to hint that you should disregard matter or things or money or food or anything like that. No. See it for what it is and enjoy it. But stay free. So our journey within as a meditator is a journey of releasing the delusions so that we can be free, so we can see the beauty, the truth. And we just learn to resonate with it. And then you're able to see it in others better. Okay?